The lamp is nearly out, and Seneca has not slept. Somewhere on the road between Nomentum and Rome, a courier is carrying a wax tablet toward him, and on that tablet is written the name of a man who was, until a few days ago, alive. When the letter arrives at dawn, Seneca reads it once, sets it down beside the untouched bread, and reaches for a clean sheet of papyrus because he has decided, in the space between two heartbeats, that his friend Lucilius is grieving badly and must be answered. We are told that the letter he wrote that morning, or one very much like it, has come down to us as the 63rd of the Epistulae Moralis, the moral letters, addressed to Lucilius Jr., procurator of Sicily and Seneca's closest correspondent in the final years of his life. It is a letter about the death of a mutual friend, a man named Flaccus, whom Lucilius has been mourning, in Seneca's judgment, without restraint and without dignity. It is also, though Seneca does not say so directly, a letter about how one loves the dead, which is a harder question than how one mourns them, and a question the Stoics did not evade. Let us reflect, then, on what Seneca undertakes to teach his friend. The principle at issue is not that grief is forbidden, though this is the caricature of Stoicism that has come down to us through the centuries. The principle is stranger and more demanding, and it concerns the relationship between memory and gratitude. To grieve a friend excessively, Seneca argues, is not to honor the friend, but to insult him. It is to treat the fact of his having lived as a debt the universe owes you, rather than as a gift the universe once extended. It is, in the sharpest phrasing Seneca gives it, a kind of ingratitude dressed up as loyalty. Consider the sentence with which he opens the letter in the Gummere translation that has come down to us in the public domain. I am grieved to hear that your friend Flaccus is dead, but I would not have you sorrow more than is fitting. The word fitting does a great deal of work there. Seneca is not asking Lucilius to feel nothing. He is asking Lucilius to feel the correct amount, which is to say, to feel what the situation warrants, and no more. And this is a distinction the Stoics inherited from their Greek forebears and refined over 3 centuries of practice. That a man should not grieve at all, Seneca writes, I hardly dare to demand, and yet I know that it is the better way. He is honest about the distance between the ideal and what he expects of his friend. He is not a moralist barking from a height. He is a man who has himself buried a son, who has himself been exiled from those he loved, who has himself sat beside a lamp at dawn, writing to someone who has just lost someone. He knows the terrain. The principle, then, stated plainly, grief that persists beyond its natural season is not love, but self-regard. It is the mourner insisting that the world owed him more than it gave, when in truth the world owed him nothing, and gave him a friend anyway, for a time, and then, as it does with all things, took the friend back. To weep for what one has lost, Seneca will argue, without also giving thanks for what one had, is to have understood nothing of what friendship is. To understand why Seneca writes this letter with such particular authority, and why Lucilius would have received it as coming from a man who had earned the right to speak, we must consider the circumstances of Seneca's own life in the years the moral letters were composed. The year is likely 63 or 64 of the Common Era. Seneca is somewhere in his late 60s. He has 2 years earlier withdrawn from the court of the Emperor Nero, whom he served for the better part of a decade as advisor and, in effect, as the intellectual conscience of the Roman state. That service ended badly. It was always going to end badly. Seneca had been Nero's tutor since the boy was 12, had helped guide the early years of what Romans hopefully called the quinquennium, the 5 good years, and had watched, with what one imagines was a growing and quiet horror, as the young emperor turned first cruel, then paranoid, then murderous. Nero had killed his own mother, Agrippina, in 59, and Seneca had, to his lasting disgrace, helped compose the letter to the Senate that justified the killing. He knew what he was. He did not pretend otherwise. By 62, Seneca had asked to retire. Nero permitted it, in the limited sense that emperors permit anything. Seneca surrendered a great portion of his wealth, which was vast, some of it acquired in ways he would not have defended in the pages of a philosophical treatise, and withdrew to his estates outside Rome. It is in this retirement, in these last 2 or 3 years of his life, that he wrote the Epistulae Morales, 124 letters to Lucilius, of which we possess the great majority. He wrote them knowing he was being watched. He wrote them knowing that Nero, having tasted the ease of eliminating inconvenient persons, would eventually come for him. He wrote them, one might say, as a man arranging his soul in the correct posture for what was coming. In 65, when the Pisonian conspiracy against Nero was uncovered, Seneca was accused of complicity, whether justly or not is still debated, and he was ordered to take his own life. He obeyed. Tacitus preserves the account. Seneca cut his veins, and when the blood came slowly, on account of his age and his ascetic diet, he took hemlock, and when that too was slow, he was carried into a hot bath, where he finally suffocated in the steam. His wife Paulina attempted to die with him and was prevented by Nero's men. This is the man writing to Lucilius about grief. This is the hand holding the stylus, a man who has served an emperor he came to fear, who has grown rich in a way he could not entirely justify, who has lost a son in his younger years, who has been exiled to Corsica for 8 years on a charge of adultery he may or may not have committed, and who now, in the last light of his life, is writing letters to a friend about how to bear the death of another friend well. The letters were not private. Seneca knew they would circulate. He was writing, in a sense, a manual for how a Stoic conducts himself in the endgame, and he was writing it under conditions in which the endgame was no longer theoretical. Every letter is composed by a man who could reasonably expect the imperial guard to arrive at his door within the year. Lucilius, for his part, was in Sicily, serving as procurator, an administrator of imperial finances in the province. He was younger than Seneca, though not young. He had literary ambitions of his own. He and Seneca had known each other for many years, and the tone of the letters is the tone of 2 men who have shared a great deal of weather. When Flaccus dies, whoever Flaccus was, and we know very little about him beyond what the letter tells us, Lucilius writes to Seneca as one writes to the friend who will understand, and Seneca replies as one replies to a friend who is drowning, which is to say, with love and with a rope and with no illusions about how cold the water is. Let us turn then to what Seneca actually writes and how the principle operates in his hands. The letter is short, by the standards of the collection, perhaps 3 or 4 pages in modern printings. It moves quickly because Seneca understands that a grieving man cannot bear a long argument, and that consolation must be delivered in doses the sufferer can swallow. He begins, as we have heard, by conceding the grief. He does not tell Lucilius he is wrong to weep. He tells him only that there is a fitting measure, and that to exceed the measure is not to love more, but to love less well. Then, in a passage that has struck readers for 2,000 years, he writes this: "Let us see to it that the recollection of those whom we have lost becomes a pleasant memory to us. No man reverts with pleasure to any subject which he will not be able to reflect upon without pain." Consider what he is saying. The mourner who cannot think of the dead friend without collapsing in fresh grief will, in time, stop thinking of the dead friend at all. The pain will make the memory unbearable, and the mind, which is a self-protecting instrument, will file the memory away and stop opening the drawer. The friend, in this way, dies twice, once in the body and again in the mind of the one who loved him, because that mind can no longer bear to summon him. The Stoic response, then, is not to suppress the memory, but to purify it, to arrive through practice at the state in which the friend can be thought of with pleasure rather than with anguish. This is not achieved by pretending the loss did not happen. It is achieved by giving the loss its correct place in a larger accounting, one in which the friend was a gift, freely given, and the gift has now been withdrawn, as all gifts are eventually withdrawn, and the appropriate response to the withdrawal of a gift is not rage, but gratitude for having received it at all. He has lost his friend, Seneca writes, of the man who mourns badly. Yes, but he had the pleasure of possessing him. It is ungrateful not to reckon up what one has received, but rather to write down only the loss. The image is bookkeeping, and it is deliberate. Seneca, who managed vast estates and administered imperial finance, reaches for the metaphor of the ledger, and he suggests that the mourner is a man who has entered only the debit column, ignoring the credit column entirely. He goes further. He writes about the mourner who parades his grief, who insists on visible suffering, who takes a kind of pride in how devastated he is. Seneca is unsparing here. Some men, he says, shed tears to make a display of them, and are dry-eyed as long as no one is looking, judging it disgraceful not to weep when everyone weeps. This evil of taking our cue from others has become so deeply implanted that even that most simple of things, grief, becomes a matter of pretense. You feel when reading this that Seneca has watched too many Roman funerals, that he has stood beside too many biers on which the wailing of the professional mourners, the hired women who tore their hair and beat their breasts for a fee, has drowned out whatever real feeling the family might have had. He is impatient with theatre. He wants the thing itself. And what is the thing itself? It is the private, quiet acknowledgement that a person you loved has died, and that your life will now proceed without them, and that this is a sorrow, and that the sorrow will pass, as all things pass, including, in time, yourself. The Stoic does not pretend the sorrow does not exist. The Stoic does not indulge it either. The Stoic sits with it, weighs it, gives it its due, and then, when the due has been paid, returns to the business of living. Seneca offers a specific and practical instruction. Let us take pains to remember our friends who have died, but not to miss them in the sense of being wounded. The distinction is between remembering and missing. Remembering is an act of the mind, a summoning, a recognition. Missing is the wound, the raw place, the refusal to accept that the friend is gone. The Stoic remembers. The Stoic does not indulge the wound. He offers, too, the argument from the friend's perspective, which is subtle and worth pausing over. If your friend, he says, could see you weeping without end, could see you refusing to be consoled, could see you telling yourself and everyone around you that your life is now ruined, what would your friend think of you? Would he be honored by this display, or would he be pained by it? The Stoic answer is that the friend would be pained. That the friend, if he loved you, would want you to live well, to remember him with fondness, to speak of him at dinner, and to continue the life that he can no longer share. To grieve immoderately, then, is not only ungrateful to the universe, it is unkind to the dead. It treats the friend as an occasion for your suffering, rather than as a person who, in life, wished you well. This is, I think, the deepest turn in the letter, and it is the turn that separates Seneca from the ordinary consoler. He does not tell Lucilius that time will heal. He tells Lucilius that Flaccus, if he could see him now, would want him to stop. Toward the end of the letter, Seneca does something that surprises the first-time reader. He confesses. He tells Lucilius that he himself, when a friend named Annaeus Serenus died, grieved beyond measure, and that he now regrets it. I lost him so completely, he writes, that I could not bear up under my grief. Today, I comfort myself in this way, since I am among those whom immoderate weeping cannot help. He puts himself in the position of the man who did it wrong, and he offers his wrong as instruction. This is not a philosopher lecturing from a pulpit. This is an old man saying, I have done this badly, and I am telling you what I learned from doing it badly, because I love you, and I do not wish you to suffer as I suffered. What then is the structural lesson Seneca is offering? What is he actually teaching beneath the specific occasion of Flaccus's death and Lucilius's grief? He is teaching first that mourning is a practice, not an event. It has stages and rhythms and a proper duration, and to perform it well requires attention and self-knowledge. It is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you do, and like any activity, it can be done badly or well. The Stoic does not disdain the practice. The Stoic takes it seriously as a practice and asks how it ought to be conducted. He is teaching, second, that memory is the true site of friendship after death. The friend continues to exist, in a certain sense, in the mind of the one who remembers him. This is not a claim about the immortality of the soul, which the Stoics were ambivalent about. It is a claim about the responsibility of the survivor. You are now the keeper of this person. What you do with your memory of him is what becomes of him, in the only realm where anything of him remains. And if your memory of him is only pain, then you have allowed him to become only pain, which he was not in life, and which he did not deserve to become in death. He is teaching, third, that gratitude is the answer to loss, not consolation, not distraction, not the passage of time. Gratitude, the recognition that you had something, and that having something is itself a kind of miracle in a universe that does not owe you anything, and that the correct response to having had something, even after the having is over, is thanks. This is a hard teaching. It cuts against a great deal of what we are told about grief in our time, and we may suspect in Seneca's time as well. It suggests that the mourner who cannot let go is not the truer lover, but the poorer accountant. It suggests that fidelity to the dead is expressed not by unending sorrow, but by continuing to live well in a way the dead would approve of, remembering them with the ease that comes only when the sorrow has been metabolized. The Stoic conception of grief, one must consider, sits inside a larger conception of what a human life is. For the Stoics, everything one possesses, one's body, one's reputation, one's wealth, one's family, one's friends, is held on loan. Nothing is owned. Epictetus makes this most explicit in the Enchiridion, when he says that if your child dies, you should not say, "I have lost my child," but rather, "I have returned my child," as one returns a book to the library from which it was borrowed. This sounds cold to modern ears, and perhaps it sounded cold to some Roman ears as well. But it is not cold in its intent. It is an attempt to place the human being in correct relation to the impermanence of everything the human being loves. If you understand that you never own the friend, then you understand that his death is not a theft. It is a completion. He came into your life, he stayed for a while, he departed. The universe has not wronged you. It has, if anything, favored you by giving you the friend at all for the years you had him. To mourn him as though the universe had wronged you is to have misunderstood the terms of the loan. This does not eliminate sorrow. Seneca is very clear that it does not. Sorrow is natural and appropriate and belongs to the human being as much as laughter does. What it eliminates is the extra layer, the resentment, the sense of grievance, the feeling that one has been cheated. Those, Seneca says, are not grief. Those are something else, something the mourner has added to grief and mistaken for it. And those the Stoic can and must strip away. The letter ends, as most of the moral letters end, with a small gift, a saying, an aphorism Seneca has picked up from his reading. He offers Lucilius a line for the day, something to carry into the hours after the letter is set down. He does not linger. He does not sentimentalize. He signs off, in effect, and the letter goes into the courier's bag, and Seneca returns to whatever he was doing before Flaccus died, which is to say, to the business of arranging his own soul for his own end, which he knew was coming, and which came, in fact, not long after. Consider, then, what is being asked of you. Not that you should not grieve. Seneca did not ask that of Lucilius, and I will not ask it of you. Grief is what a human being does when a human being loses someone the human being loved, and to pretend otherwise is to lie about what we are. But consider whether there is, in your own grief for those you have lost, a component that is not grief, a component of resentment, perhaps, of feeling that the universe was unfair, of feeling that you have been diminished, that something has been taken from you, which was owed to you, that you are entitled to a longer time than you were given. Consider whether that component is grief at all, or whether it is something else, something the Stoics would call by a different name and treat by a different method. Consider, too, the friends you still have, the people who are still alive and who will not always be alive. Seneca would ask you whether you are conducting your friendships with them in such a way that when they die, you will be able to remember them with pleasure rather than with anguish. Whether you have said the things that ought to be said, whether you have given the gratitude that is owed, not at the funeral, when it is too late, but now, while it can still be received. The question the letter leaves us with is not, how shall I mourn? The question is, how shall I love, such that when the loved is gone, my memory of the loved is a gift I can keep opening. rather than a wound I cannot bear to touch. This is not a question with a quick answer. It is a question one lives with. It is a question one suspects that Seneca himself was still living with in the last months of his life, as he wrote by lamplight to a friend in Sicily about a mutual friend who had, that week, died. The lamp goes out. The letter is sealed. The courier takes the road back toward the coast, and somewhere, in a house in Nomentum, an old man who has already outlived most of what he loved sits for a while in the dark, and then rises and begins the next letter.